What I wanted to talk about today is really where the transatlantic partnership stands today. And I think the Marshall Plan laid the foundation for not only a strong transatlantic relationship, but also for a unifying Europe. So then in 1947, our Secretary of State, George Marshall, had this great idea. Let's help European economies recover. Let's spend lots of money to help Europe recover economically. It was not a popular idea. You had a Democratic president in Harry Truman. You had Republican isolationist majorities in both houses of Congress. And the Congress had to appropriate those funds for the Marshall Plan. And they were not convinced that this was a good idea. You saw the Truman administration realize it had to engage Congress. And with the help of key members, including the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Arthur Vandenberg, who really deserves a shout out here, they convinced key Republican members of Congress that it was in the U.S. interest to rebuild European economies, not only because one day they would be good trade partners for the U.S., but also because they were concerned about the spread of Soviet communism, and felt that if European countries didn't have viable economies, communism would be a very attractive political ideology. Remember, this is a time when Britain's empire is collapsing, and you have to remember also that the Americans wanted to include the former enemy, West Germany, in the Marshall Plan, which was not a popular idea in much of Europe. But again, this gets back to an American conception that without a unified Europe, you are not going to have lasting peace. And if you look at how the plan, it really wasn't a plan. I mean, basically the U.S. said to the European participants, you all tell us what you need. You put together a plan. Oh, and by the way, you decide among yourselves how that money should be distributed. Brilliant. Because the exercise of the Marshall Plan was an exercise in European cooperation. So let's fast forward. Go through the next 7 decades. Relations were not always harmonious. There are lots of policy differences we can point to between Americans and Europeans. But that underlying belief in the same values, in overarching interests, and trust in each other was there. And that is why this transatlantic alliance has endured over those 7 decades. Now, of course, that brings us to today. President Trump's America First policy feels very different from this policy that Truman pursued back in 1947 and that successive U.S. administrations have pursued. I think a major reason for that is because Donald Trump, rather than seeing alliances as something enduring, sees them as something transactional. I would say on the issue of NATO defense spending that while he's been very vocal about this, what you've seen on the ground has been a very strong U.S. commitment to the European Deterrence Initiative. The U.S. has now stationed troops in Poland. So I think there are some actions that show strongly how the U.S. remains committed to NATO. But what I want to say here is that I think President Trump's views are not a cause of transatlantic discord. I think they're a symptom of trends across all of our societies, of Americans, of Dutch, French, of Germans, who feel they have not been well served by the system. They've lost their jobs. They feel threatened by immigration. They feel they're not being heard at national level. And they're angry. And I think those of us who believe we have been well served by this order that goes back to the Marshall Plan need to think about how we articulate why we see that order as relevant we want to put in place policies that speak to legitimate grievances of people who feel excluded from that system.
So I would suggest that the wider context here is the American rise to global hegemony during the 20th century. Because since the early 20th century, the United States had already been the predominant power in the financial and economic realm. The Marshall Plan, you could say, is a milestone on the political side of this process. Now, on the European side, people were happy to receive the help. They were eager to welcome the Americans into their midst, more or less permanently. So you can also most clearly see in the origins of NATO, this was memorized earlier. So you could say that next to America's involvement with commitment post-World War II in 1947, 1948, we can also speak of kind of an American empire by invitation. The transatlantic relationship has endured, but it has also changed. NATO was invited into the countries that used to belong to the Warsaw Pact. It was invited even into countries that used to belong to the Soviet Union. But this and the alliance's stand that other countries should have this right too to invite NATO, to invite the United States in, has also become a source, a contributor to East-West tensions. These tensions, in turn, have revived the old acrimony between Washington and its European allies over whether the Europeans are actually willing to do what is necessary for the defense of their own part of the world. Differences in 2003 over the invasion of Iraq were a serious breach, as the Atlantic Alliance has seen since the 1940s. The biggest impact, of course, has been the election of Donald Trump. But Trump is as much a symptom of longer-running trends in American politics and life as he is the originator of America First. But by definition, his coming to power with this program has changed the transatlantic relationship. Where you heard the term transactional, I'm sure we're going to hear it again. On the European side, countries, people have certainly also become more preoccupied with their own affairs, less outward-looking, more worried about their own interests. And one can be shocked, although not be surprised, that many people and governments feel that the United States is a less reliable partner, maybe even less relevant in today's world. Yet, the structures built from the time of the Marshall Plan endure, and so do many of the geopolitical realities that produced the Marshall Plan in the first place. To say nothing, in spite of everything, of the shared values that we've mentioned already. Now, next to the relationship between continuity and change, historians trying to figure out how things work in the past, so that you maybe think more clearly about your own time. Historians are also interested in the relationship between structure and agency, in the freedom people, acting individually and in organized forms, have to choose certain actions, certain policies over others. In the final analysis, it's still up to us where the Marshall Plan's legacy will go from this very difficult moment.
What I want to go and analyze is the visualization of the Marshall Plan. Because that's how you win the hearts and minds of people. With images, with concrete ideas, scripts and narratives. And I want to look back at how the Americans did this in the late 40s, early 50s, with the media and channels of communication that were at their disposal. And then the question, of course, is what do we do with some of these things today? What kind of narratives do we have of the Marshall Plan? I think in many ways we're talking about the Marshall Plan as a kind of myth about something remarkable in the 20th century that happened. People such as David Elwood, historian from Bologna, called the Marshall Plan the greatest propaganda project ever done in peacetime. Well, if it's economically, if the economical dimension is not the most important one, what is it then? And I would argue that we should address something like a blind spot, and that's culture. How did culture play into the idea of the Marshall Plan? One thing that this information unit was particularly interested in was to make sure that people in the countries are aware of the Marshall Plan. That it's an American idea and an American vision that's going to help to improve the living conditions of the people. Also, to make sure that the people understood what this was about. That it's not yet another form of the Rijksministerium for propaganda. Yeah? To make sure that people understand what the vision of the Marshall Plan is. And it's not only one of hegemonical power, but something that's of vital interest for each and every individual within a larger group of people. And how can you visualize Europe and working together through a person holding the globe, and you see a number of references to peace. But let me focus on this image here because it's a Dutch winner, right? Dirksen from Amsterdam who created this image, and it's particularly striking for me coming from Germany because it was only shortly after the war, and look what kind of flag is quite central here. How can you bring a Dutch visual artist to put the flag of the former enemy at that prominent position? This is not the Americans who tell people, you know, give Germany a break, we have to look forward, we have to collaborate, if we want to have a stable economical, political situation, we have to not follow the Warburg Plan, but we have to work together. No, the United States were creating a framework and then inviting artists, graphic designers, writers, people working in film,